sound.
But it wasn't that easy.
You have to compound that and layer that. God damn it! You ready to change some shit.
Mm-hmm.
And that thunder, man.
Do you want police involvement? How much do you want the police to be involved?
Hey, you guys, you ever heard of Anchor? It's the easiest way to make a podcast.
No, I haven't. Is it free?
Yes, it is.
But are there creation tools that allow you to edit it on your phone and computer?
Yeah, there are.
But is there a way that we can spread this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Google Podcast?
Yeah, it does it for you. It allows you to make money with minimum listenership.
So if you haven't already, go to the Anchor app or anchor.fm to get started.
What they said.
Welcome everybody yet again to another beautiful episode of Bridging the Gap with Bill, Shy, Scooby, and Mac, and our return special guest Breezy Scott back in the house.
Hey, hi everyone.
Bringing some more wellness here on the show. This is episode 17.
Yep.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So yeah, but before we get into all that, we're gonna do the whole little roundabout.
Yes, so make sure y'all go tune in to all the social medias at Scooby the Kid 252, at Chef Mac 1523, at Bill_Perry, at Cheryl Perry, at Breezy Gap 77. I know it's a lot, but it's worth the follow for every one of those, and we'll let Breezy tell her socials real quick.
You can find me on Instagram at Breezy Golden G. You can also visit my website, goldengaian.com. That's golden, GAIAN.com.
All right.
Yeah, indeed.
So,
Well,
before we jump into everything, like we normally do, how is everybody doing this week? We'll start with Bill and work our way.
I am doing fantastic.
I am doing absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm not a fan of technology, but yeah, other than that, I'm doing great because the new computer is being a hassle for me.
Oh man, I know how that feels. This week has definitely been a learning experience for me, so I'm happy that we're coming up to a new week.
Indeed.
I've been doing good. I got a new computer and ready to get into editing stuff.
Well, how's that working out? He doesn't like technology, and you got a new computer.
Well, we're both. I was smart and got a computer that I knew how it worked already. He just bought a computer. It's like, oh, that looks cool. And it's like,
Now he's frustrated, man. Scooby been downloading something for like 3 days, man.
I've downloaded it once.
3 days, man. Come on, Scooby.
That shit sucks.
That's some serious growing pains. Jeez.
Hey, but I'm blessed though. You know what I'm saying? I got a good computer. Let me just say.
Hey, man, no doubt. Well, what's up, man? Hunter, what's on the news, man?
Not much. I can't say not much because I have not even looked at all.
I've kind of made it a point not to look at the news. My mind has been on other things, so I don't really know what's happening right now. I do know there's protests, and I'm with them, but I don't know anything else. I made it a point.
That is something though. 11 states have said that they have experienced a significant increase in COVID cases.
That's something right. Now, I didn't know due to the protests, but I have seen increases because I've been watching Mississippi.
Well, I guess that was to be a given, that was going to inevitably happen. We were kind of wondering how the numbers would be. Has there been any increases in your area with COVID-19 because of the protest?
I'm going to say that I'm with Shy on this one. After the first initial wave of protests and that first week of intense protesting, I kind of put a cap on my news watching. So in terms of increases in coronavirus in Michigan, I'm not too sure. We just opened up here in Michigan and we're this past week. So it's the end of the first week of us being open and, going back to restaurants, being able to go to different stores now, being able to go inside certain stores. So we just opened up. So we're going to see what happens, especially after all the protests that happened in Detroit and Flint and Grand Rapids. So we'll see what happens. I'm hoping for the best because most of Michigan did wear masks when we went out and protested. Most people were wearing masks.
That's good. It seemed to be here. I only made it to the tail end of one of them, but everyone seemed to have masks on, here as well.
Yeah, he's talking about the one I was at and stuff. We had masks, but, social distancing, truthfully was just out the window because of the camaraderie and the event, as it were, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, kind of like yourself, I don't think there's been any numbers that's been reported in our state as of yet, as far as the current, but yeah. But, you know, kind of while we're there and everything, you know, as far as protesting in your area, you know, as far as your own involvement, you know, how have you been involved in that?
Oh, sure. So here I live in Livonia, which is a suburb outside of Detroit. It is a predominantly white suburb. Probably 94% of its residents are white, correct? And when I moved here, I think it was a little bit higher. So it was only 2.6% were people of color. And even at that point, less of that percentage was black. They were including like Asian and Arab American in that count. So it was a very white city. It has since it has an elderly population, so that means that most of the people are over 40 or so, and they're trying to get millennials to move back into this city. So there was a huge push, I think, near the end of 2018 to try and get some millennials to come back. So we ended up electing a Democratic mayor. So she's a little bit more progressive. So here in Livonia, there are a lot of people around my age, about 30 or so, raising families, and they're very progressive in their thoughts, but we still have some of those old timers around here that remember what it used to be like back in the 1950s. So we did have a protest here in Livonia. We were on a call with the mayor and the police chief, and they were very supportive. They were wondering, like, what do you need from us? How can we assist you? You know, do you want police involvement? How much do you want the police to be involved? And we were really grateful that they were open to listening, that they were open to not being involved, because we had some people in our group that didn't want the police to just do that photo op and take a knee and do the photo op with us. We wanted to challenge our community and really get those conversations started around race. And so we opted out. The only thing we requested of the police chief was that he protect us from counter protesters. So if there was going to be a large counter protest, that they would have a police line to help protect us from that. So that didn't end up happening. There was no real counter protest. We had a few Blue Lives Matter people drive by in their cars with their Blue Lives Matter flags, but there wasn't an actual group of people. For that, we were very grateful. The protest started with some speeches from local Black residents, and majority of them, we started off with one male who he married a white woman, and their son is like 3 years old, and they just moved back to Livonia. So that was like a really good story for him to share. And then we had two Black women, one of them about my age and the other one recently graduated from Livonia Public Schools. So she was able to give the school experience. And then it was my turn, and my father moved to Livonia, and I talked about his experience moving to Livonia and then how I grew up here. And I did have an experience in elementary school where a little boy told me I couldn't play with the Nintendo game because I was Black. And I shared that story with the crowd. There were like 2,000 Livonia residents at this rally. And I was sharing this story, and the crowd like visibly gasped. Like they had no idea, because that would have been like 25 years ago or so, give or take. Yeah. And so they didn't realize that. And I said, you know, no, it was a good thing, because their parents called my parents. They had that awkward conversation, you know, and then the kids had to talk. So I had to talk to the little boy, and we're still friends to this day. But we had to get over that initial, like, we have to talk about race. We have to talk about, you know, that skin color doesn't exactly mean that personality traits go with that skin color. You know, so we had that conversation. And the message that I shared with the residents was, it's time to have those uncomfortable conversations with your fellow neighbors. It's time to have those uncomfortable conversations with your kids. Because once you start having those conversations, they become less uncomfortable. You become more like, it's easier to talk about it. Right. And so they really benefited from that. And then I wanted to, you know, being half Black and half white, I kind of see both sides, you know. So I wanted to have a common denominator, and everybody's into business. People can really relate to that. So I said, every entrepreneur knows that success lies outside the comfort zone. So if we really want to be successful at this, we have to get outside our comfort zone and be willing to have those conversations. So I really applaud the residents of Livonia for coming out. After I gave that speech, I had my 3rd grade science teacher, Mrs. Ward, come up, and like, she was like, I never knew. Oh my gosh, it's so good to see you again. And, I had a few other neighbors come out because they saw my Facebook post, and that was their first time. Like, these are the all lives matter type of people. And that was their first time really realizing that even after so many years of, like, even after the Jim Crow laws, even after desegregation of schools, Livonia itself is still struggling with that. And I think that was the first time they heard my stories. And I think that it made it more real to hear from residents of Livonia who live there and have lived there.
I was going to say, you saying that it's like 94% white or something?
Correct, yeah.
So were they initially adverse to the idea of the protests, or they welcomed it initially?
A lot of them were welcoming of it. They wanted to have a protest here. There was a big scare on Twitter because the Detroit protests were going on, and we had a lot of issues with suburban, well-intentioned young people going down to Detroit and kind of trashing it a little bit, because that's not their city they should throw a riot in. They should throw a riot in their own city. So we were tweeting, I was out there tweeting too, don't go to Detroit, protest in your own cities. And people in Detroit were saying the same thing, like, go Howell. Howell, Michigan is known as the KKK capital of Michigan. So, like, they have a history. So they were saying, go to Howell, go to Livonia, go to Rochester Hills. Sterling Heights had the nickname Sterile Heights because there were no Black people. So we have a few towns in Michigan that are known for their discrimination, and Black Twitter got right on it, and they were like, go out to Livonia. So then Livonia residents got really scared. They're like, we don't want people coming out here from Detroit. And I was like, no, that's not what they mean. They mean to start a protest within your own community of your own community. So there was some hesitation about having the protest. There was concerns for safety, whether or not people could bring their kids. But what we told the police chief and the mayor is that it's family friendly. We're going to communicate that to our protesters. And we had a safety team. We had a security team and a safety team, and they worked together. The security team kept cars from running into us. And then the safety team kept people from, like, screaming fuck the police too many times, because we had kids with us. So it was a really coordinated effort of the group, probably like 15 core people who were working on that protest.
It's funny you say that, because the protest here, it was peaceful and everything, and it ended peacefully. But there, like you were saying, there was this one moment where the younger ones was kind of getting a little, and they started like screaming, forget race, fuck racist police. It was all in the cop's face, and the cops are all kind of like, hey, we're here to, like, protect you right now, kind of attitudes. Like, we're not the enemy here. Like, they were doing a little rally and stuff. And one of the cops that's, known in the community kind of started bringing it back, what I'm saying? Like, hey, it's not about that, da, 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 da. But yeah, you need it for those kind of moments, because people start getting fiery. And because there's a lot of emotion about it. We were actually having a conversation the other night where, one of the people that was with us, I won't say who, is like really against cops. And the irony was, here I was, the Black guy in this particular conversation, saying it's not that serious. Like, I understood where she was coming from, but it was kind of like, no, fuck the police, like, style, like, you know what I'm saying? Fuck them and stuff, And I'm like, look, I understand your sentiment, but it's not about that. And she's all like, yeah, they should just burn this whole motherfucker down. And I'm like, it ain't about that either. Like, there needs to be a plan, like that video I sent you, Breezy.
After the initial anger, now we got to have a plan. You can't just keep burning.
Yeah, you just can't keep burning things down.
Know?
And so, but I just found it real funny that, I was having to be the one in this kind of weird position of having to say, don't take it that far, being the Black guy. And she's all like, but they're killing you. They're killing you. And I'm just like, I understand what you're saying. I'm with you.
I'm here.
It's like, I'm here. I'm here. I exist. It's okay. I love you for your passion and energy, but let's bring some sensibilities about it, Oh, man.
That's very true. And
I was gonna say, it's funny because it's so true, like, when you actually have the conversations, like, the truth gets told,
Oh, yeah, and it gets real, and look, Breezy, like, we had the show last week, I think it was last week, right? Me and Shy, like, the George Floyd stuff and all that had just popped off. So, Matt goes into his whole little thing when it's like, so how's everybody feeling? And, me and Shy over here, we feeling some type of way, but I'm all like, trying to be all, well, I'm okay. I don't want to go into it, da-da-da. Shy kind of does the same thing as me. And then Scooby, he the one that opened it up. Well, I ain't feeling good. I'm sad. And then I'm like, oh, Lord, now me and Shy got to go there. You know what I'm saying? But we needed that push, because, we were just trying to be careful, but we needed to do that. We needed to talk about it. And I appreciated Scoob for doing that. He even said later on after the show was done, he's like, I didn't push that, did it? It's like, no, man, me and Shy kind of both needed that because, we wanted to talk about it. I just think we both, were volatile, and it didn't want to like go to whatever, but we needed to have a discussion. It's just like right now, we're having a discussion, we're sitting here laughing too, even though this is serious, but, having a way to bring some balance about it that we can all just kind of make sense of it all because it's maddening. It's really maddening, man.
And you know what really just blows me away is hearing you talk about the different cities in your area that still is going through this, like they're marching with Martin Luther King back in '68. You still have to integrate. And I'm hearing this. So I thought that we were about 40 years past this, but we're not there yet. So I'm glad to hear about all of this. And I'm glad to know the huge difference is the passion that we're seeing from other races, and everybody else that has to put, in an effort for this to truly work. It just can't be a weight on, just one shoulder. You know what I mean?
No doubt.
And we all have to carry this, and that's just such a positive feeling for me to see because it's something, of course, we've all have never seen before, but to truly see it working and actually things taking effect and you're seeing change because of this and protest really does work.
Oh, man, it's happening worldwide too.
Yeah.
Outside of our country, I think Germany staged the biggest one, man.
What?
Germany.
Yeah, they know.
Yeah. I don't know. There's images all online about it right now, but there's been grand ones here in our own nation too. I saw this one footage of LA. They had a massive one there, like it was insane.
In Hollywood.
Yeah, like they showed like this aerial shot of it was just like, are you serious? And everybody, of different, races and what, like, everybody was out there kind of deal, and because it's now it's like it's a race for our humanity at this point. Because, just as quick as those people are rallying to do that, it's like also the rise in violence has come up. There's been a couple of more shootings that made nationwide news. As far as cops killing an unarmed black person, like it's still been, it hasn't thwarted that just quite yet. But now like the energy is there for the first time though consistently. Like usually one event, then the energy dissipates.
And the evidence.
Yeah, and the evidence, and then another event, and then it dissipates. The energy seems to be holding on this time. That's different stuff. Like even with you, Breezy, I commend you for organizing things over there and sharing your stories because
that's 2,000
no doubt.
people.
For you telling your story about what happened to you, I get it, man. I've told a story to these cats and stuff, about being called a nigga for the first time in my single digits, and sharing these experiences with people, like letting them know, like, this has been going on, y'all. But, finally having the conversation where people don't feel like this fingers being pointed at them.
Correct.
They're willing to listen. They want to hear it, It's nothing being shut off or not, or even pretending like it doesn't even exist.
Right.
Yeah. One thing I'm not for is the just fuck you type energy, like, you're wrong, I'm right type shit, and I see a lot more of the, just like understanding coming from both sides, which is like, we haven't really seen that, ever really, You had the people that were like, they believed it and they didn't, but now you got people on both sides trying to understand, and like, that's when we really come to a place where we can actually make a change,
Right.
And I think it's like he said, it's the humanity part now. Seeing the video of, I can only watch it once, and
I couldn't watch it again.
that and just see it's just to be human. That you have to feel something. I think it's too horrible.
And we're off the heels of a few things that have shed light on, because the Me Too thing is not too far behind this.
Nope.
You know what I'm saying? And the LGBT community's plight. All of this is being discussed simultaneously right now.
Correct.
In the heat of the moment, as it were, of course, it's police brutality against unarmed black men and such. or people for that matter, rather, because, you know, we got Breonna Taylor and the like, and Sandra Bland, but you know, more so just about, you know, biasness against just, you know, supposedly people different from you, as it were, you know, the LGBT community, you know, people hearing women and hearing them for what, you know, this Me Too thing, really, you know, taking these stories in, you know, and not deflecting with some stuff, you know, trying to find like, you know, holes in the woman's story to, you know, denigrate her character, but actually investigating the guys. And now we see people like Weinstein, who's eradicated from the scene, you know, and Cosby and a few others and stuff that just got, you know, we're doing things. And that's just the Hollywood stuff. You know, the Me Too thing opened up the conversation overall. I mean,
For politics and everything.
You know, the news because they're celebrities, but it opened up the conversation about, you know, the way men looked at women overall. You know, and because, you know, there's still disparaging things there in terms of the financial gap and such. You know who are the most educated group in the United States?
Who?
African American women.
Yeah, because of the intersectional fight. Woo, woo. This fight is intersectional, like you were saying.
You and Shy both represent that because you both got college degrees. You know what I'm saying? So y'all represent that. And guess what? I'm the black guy over here who dropped out of college. Oh man! Oh look! See, Scooby's the white guy. Didn't even go to college. I mean, what's Actually, I do have a degree, but you know, I just have a liberal arts degree. I didn't get it in my field, but nonetheless, what I'm speaking more to is like y'all are the most educated in this nation. But you know, if you get a job at a company, I could still possibly make more than y'all.
Yep.
You know
Yes,
what I mean?
you can.
And I don't have the same education as you guys. You know, that's what I'm talking about. There's still that shit. So, you know, that's being discussed. I don't know if there's any moves on that front being made. I guess you and Shy would know that more than me.
I really don't know. I feel like it's one thing at a time right now. And because I remember hearing about something about the LGBT. Yeah. They wanted to merge their parade with the LA parade. And people are really upset about it. And they're saying usurpers.
Yeah, that does kind of usurp the moment.
No. Here's the thing. Everybody needs to understand this, that the Black Lives Matter movement is intersectional and it can be opened up, and that the people in the Black Lives Matter movement have to look at their own prejudice and biases, because there are Black gay people, there are transgender gay people who are Black, and this fight is intersectional. So like, happy June, happy Pride Month to all the Black LGBTQ youth out there. You are not forgotten. You know, you actually, gay Black males commit more suicide than most other cohorts. So because they're discriminated against in their communities as well. So they really feel like they don't fit in. So like, that discrimination goes down the line. The reason that Black females are the most educated is because of the fact that they're Black. They always have to prove, they have to work against that stereotype, and the fact that they're female. So we have to work against the female stereotype that females aren't as smart and aren't as studious. And that I've been in social circles where I know more than most of my male counterparts. And when I say something, they don't believe me until I cite my sources. So that's something that a lot of men don't have to do. How often do you have to cite your sources in your conversations? Women are challenged more often to do that than not. So this fight is intersectional, and that's why the mayor of Livonia said, we're going to see a summer of protests, because it's not going to stop. Because with Pride Month, you start to see those protests, and you're going to start to learn more about how the Black community is affected by LGBTQ issues. The same thing goes for environmentalism, because a lot of low SES communities, who majority are of color, are in areas where there are gas refineries, oil refineries, and large animal farming concentration camps. So like, large places where they produce lots of animals, and then the animal waste gets sprayed over the communities, or you can just smell that waste for miles. So nobody really wants to move into those communities unless you're lower social economic status. So this fight isn't intersectional. It's going to keep going.
And of course, I mean, Flint.
Yep, Flint water crisis. The Attorney General just announced yesterday that they're dropping the charges. Nobody's going to be charged for the Flint water crisis. Wow. So it's postponed. It's postponed, and they don't know when they're going to pick the trial up again.
Yeah, you know, that makes so much sense, especially thinking about the South and you know, the religious aspect about it. And, you know, when it comes to young black men, you know, there can be serious bias, serious issues, and there's no way they could truly live how they really are. They would have to move away pretty much to become.
And you know, you was talking about suicides. There was actually a young black gay man that set himself on fire down here some years back. You know, because of that kind of bias. And you know what the irony is? In a lot of the black churches down here, the person that's leading the choir is usually a gay black man. I mean, be the most effeminate type of dude, you know what I'm saying? And the whole church know he gay. You know what I'm saying?
But see,
but they're not leading the choir.
Yeah,
you know?
the Lord. He's trying to, you know.
And ain't nobody, you know, they may do little whisperings about, you know, but, you know, he's allowed to be in the church. And I always find it kind of, you know, a tragic irony that, you know, these gay black men are in these situations. And that is a whole other plight. I think that, like, getting back to y'all, for black women, I think it gets, you know, it can get excused sometimes. Like, I've heard the argument with black women, like, when it comes to, like, situations where, like, say, for example, Me Too, where all women are united under one umbrella, and then, like, the white women are kind of catapulted to this certain place of victimhood.
No, actually, what I'm sure you've probably seen some things, how these CEOs have been getting in a lot of trouble, and a lot of women have been getting in just as much trouble as the Me Too movement, because just even, it won't even be subtle racism. It can be something just overt in their face.
Yeah.
And so these are women that are supposedly fighting for feminism and fighting for all that, but they're not really inclusive.
Yeah.
No.
So
you could jump. I can do a whole history thing on the suffragette movement, and there's a scene in Steel Magnolias where, which is a movie about the suffrage movement, and where a black woman walks into their clubhouse where they're planning their march, and she's interested in joining the march. She wants to talk to them about the issues involving black women and how to get those included and to get the vote for black women. And they told her, oh, well, not right now. Like, we'll tackle that another time, you know? So they basically turn this black woman away because she's black. So there is even that, like you said, a difference there, a divide there. They self-segregate even. So
yeah, I've talked to certain black women that look at Susan B. Anthony in a whole different light than the white women. You know, white women is like, they put her up there as the queen of the suffrage thing, but you talk to certain black women, they're like, yeah, but we were kind of left out of the conversation.
Yeah, oftentimes.
Like what, 40 years?
And counting, as it were, as we're talking now. And, you know, it's just like, you know, on another weird tip, like, you know, for example, like voting rights. You know, legally, as it were, you know, I've heard white women try to make this argument, but I've always had to flip the script on them when they do this. They're like, well, you know, black men were able to vote before us. I'm like, oh, so what you're saying is we were able to go into those voting booths just like our white counterparts back in the 1860s and 1920s with no problem and just vote for whoever we wanted. It's like, because that's how they make the argument sound. But
like, it wasn't that easy.
You have to compound that and layer that. Don't just simply say we had the right to vote before you, because technically that's true. You know what I'm saying? But it's just like, I mean, when it comes down to
something might have happened.
I mean, exactly. And it did, and it would. And it took well up into the 60s and stuff. You know, Lyndon Johnson. You know, that's way on down. That's literally 100 years later, 1860-something, 1960-something, you know. So I've kind of had to make that argument, you know, because, you know, white women are kind of in a weird position too, you know, as it were, because, you know, they do get treated, you know, sometimes it's, you know, under the white males.
Yes.
But the white males put them on a pedestal above all the other ones.
Yes.
So they kind of walk this weird line. Like I saw this thing the other day. There's this video footage of a line of white women locked up, standing in front of a group of black protesters. You know what I'm saying? Because
that's a powerful image.
A bunch of white cops are not going to shoot a line of white women. You know what I'm saying?
No.
They do that. And they use that to their advantage. That's what you call using your white privilege to your advantage. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I applauded them for that because they knew it's just like, you shoot one of us, you're shooting one of your sisters, your mother, your friend, whatever, somebody you know.
Potential girlfriend.
You know, and they played that in their favor. And so in that regard, I applauded them. But, you know, there are times where, as we're speaking upon, you know, the movement can be usurped for a second. But I don't think we're at that stage right now. I think there is a joint effort going on right now. I haven't seen any splintered efforts where, you know, white women are doing something on the side, or any other people are doing. Everybody's kind of joined in on these various fronts right now. It would appear.
It seems like the permission was given to join the conversation. And a lot of people, I want to remind people that because of the coronavirus lockdown, people had more access and more free time because a lot of people lost their jobs too. So that partially contributed to like the looting aspect, but it's also beneficial because I saw a status the other day where a stay-at-home mom apologized. She said, it took me until the coronavirus lockdown to actually learn about your plight, and I'm very sorry. So people are actually taking this time to read those books.
Hell yeah, like that's so beautiful to see, because it's like some people think that can't happen, but I'm like, if they really like take the time to understand just the next person about anything, most of the time they'll get it, because we all like the same, then
If you can empathize, you can the protest in Livonia was so emotional. Like at the end of it, at the very, very end of the whole protest, it was so emotional to see people walking up to the speakers and talking with them. Like I said, my one neighbor, she got like teary-eyed because she didn't even know my dad went through some of that stuff. Like I shared the story about how when he got married, just like 31 years ago, there was stuff said at his wedding to him at the wedding reception about the fact that his marriage wouldn't last. Yeah, like those relatives of relatives on my mom's side, those people that just get invited out of politeness.
Right.
Well, they weren't exactly polite. So, but this fight is going to be different per city. I can talk about Livonia, but Livonia has specific issues, and they also have a few motivations to want to work with their residents because they want millennials moving in. They want that millennial vote. They're going to do things that are going to be in our favor. They're going to work with us. So some cities that might be different. Flint, that police chief was right out there. He got out there. He wanted to meet with the protesters. He asked the protesters what their demands were. They said, walk with us. He said, okay, sounds good. They took off their riot gear and they walked with the protesters. So it's going to be different per city. And we also had people that were like really strongly fuck the police, really strongly saying that and really feeling like your friend, that they didn't want to work, like they don't trust police anymore.
Right.
And that might not be the case per township, because you might actually know people that work for the police. Like I have a friend whose son is going to join the police force, and like that's kind of scary for me, knowing that not every cop is bad, but if they don't speak up, then it sucks. It sucks when good cops don't speak up. So we need to create that culture that allows good cops to speak up, and that downplays the police unions. That's really what's hurting us, are those police unions that act like gangs, that they have each other's backs, which is great because unions have each other's backs for their employers so they don't get overworked. But at this point, we're asking those unions to understand what the citizens are facing and how those unions can correct and remedy some of their toxic behavior, frankly.
Right. And they do operate in this kind of brotherhood code of ethics, as it were. This code of silence, when they do know that there are things that are going on that that are bad and questionable. But they kind of keep this almost kind of fraternal brotherhood thing going on. And that kind of, complicit behavior is now being called out.
Yes.
People have been knowing about that pattern of behavior, but, it's being more so called out because it's like, it's not enough to say that you guys' lives matter, which they do. But, if you're complicit with your silence or turn a blind eye to things, it's just like the pattern will continue. It's like you guys are on the inside. You have a close and personal thing about it. And, I mentioned this once before. It's like, it is already obvious that all lives matter, blue lives matter. Like that's a given. It's like I've never questioned the fact that a cop's life didn't matter, or any other life, But the systemic elimination of Black people as it's been, that's why it's the question. And it's funny that people outside of the Black community, as it were, having to explain that, because it's like I'm starting to get to a point where it's like, no, they know that. It's like, it's like in explaining it, it's just like to bring clarity to a lot of people that are presumably not getting it. But I think they really do, because when you paint other scenarios where you're trying to give an example to why Black Lives Matter, and I've pointed out other scenarios, like the Jewish plight or the LGBT plight. They get it when you repaint the picture with some other plight. It's like, how come you can't get it when it's someone that looks like me? Why do I have to protest so much about it when it's someone that looks like me? I have to make it look like something else for you to empathize. And
because there's so much history there that they have to acknowledge that they can't bring themselves to go there. But see, this is forcing them to go there. I mean, one thing I didn't know is that they had Confederate statues in Washington. Why? Why are there Confederate statues for treasonous people that fought against?
And our nation's capital.
And they're in Congress. It's like 12 of them they're talking about bringing down. It doesn't make sense. These people were treasonous, but you have these Southern politicians that end up in Washington, and they can, it's no telling how it ended up. And really, all around, they have to believe. It's just, you're not going to be slaves, but we really do believe that.
I mean, again, the behavior, and I mean, to take the time out to do those kind of things, that would be like the equivalent of seeing, like, Goebbels' statue in Germany right now. You know what I'm saying? I didn't go in as far as Hitler, but like one of the other ones, Goring, or any of those other guys that was one of his henchmen. And because, they had such a powerful army and this, that, and the other, because,
treasonous army.
The Confederacy, that's, there is this thing down here where they teach the Civil War as Northern aggression.
Yeah, that's just strange to me because the Confederacy only lasted 5 years. It wasn't that long. So it wasn't like it was this intense historical moment in history. It was in the sense that, like, our nation was being ripped at the seams for economic reasons. But, like, that Northern aggression was really the South being aggressive.
See, down here, that's known as revisionism. And we're not the only state that does it. I think Texas actually took the mantle first, and they started like rewriting it that way.
Oh, they teach it in their textbooks.
And when you get to the chapter about the Civil War, it's called Northern aggression. It's not called the Civil War. It's not in every single textbook in Southern schools, but it's in a lot
not
of
the
them.
One that we went to. We went to a good school.
Our high school here and said Civil War. I'll give it to our county, but there are places where they teach it that way. Now, mind you, with that said, some of the attitudes are here. They didn't teach it in the school, but there are people that live here. Again, we do still live in a town where a black man got shot at just for going to college, trying to go to college here. And guess what? A lot of people don't know. There's a story. Yeah, James Meredith. This is the town.
This is my school. That's where I got my degree.
This is the school where that historical moment happened. It was here. And actually, a lot of people don't know about another story that happened before him. Clinton something. I forget this guy's name. But he was a black man that tried to go to Ole Miss, and he had applied. Guess what they tried to do, or I think maybe did for a hot minute? They put him in an insane asylum because they said there must be something wrong with a Negro that wants to try to apply to an all-white university in Mississippi. So they tried to commit him. The insane trying to commit the sane, as it were.
I was going to say, shouldn't the other way around?
But see, now consider that, right? Now, that was a little bit before then, but James Meredith is like the 60s. This is only 2020. That's not 100 years ago.
No.
You know what I'm saying? My parents and stuff, and I mean, so we're combating that kind of energy. But what is going on?
Yeah, we just got a mattress and shit. King size mattress. That's why I had to step out for a second. I'm not grabbing like a motherfucker today.
I'm like, what is going on?
Well, I just wanted to mention a few resources for the people that are listening, especially if you have a lot of Southern viewers and they don't understand why we're talking about race or why it matters right now. All you have to do is go read the Confederacy Cornerstone speech. And in that Cornerstone speech, really talks about how race is one of the cornerstones of the Confederacy movement. So it really puts it in perspective for you that there's a historical document that shows that they really truly believed that black men and black people were submissive to the white man. And they were second-class citizens in that sense. And then if you still have some struggle understanding why we're talking so much about race, you can watch Jane Elliott's research. She does an experiment with blue-eyed and brown-eyed kids, and she does it with children, and then she does it with adults, like maybe 20 years later. And she's a hardcore woman. She's a short, little feisty white woman who's sick of racism and sick of people thinking that it doesn't exist and doesn't affect white people. So she does this experiment where she has people with blue eyes go to one side of the room and brown eyes go to the other. And then she basically plays Jim Crow. And she says only the blue-eyed people can use this drinking fountain. They can only do this. They don't get as much time for recess. You know, they don't get as much time to complete their homework. So she does all this stuff to them, and then she has them flip the next day. And you can literally see people's behavior. You know, that whole idea that a bully only bullies you to make themselves feel better. You can see that behavior begin to happen in people. And that's why racism, why the psychological community wants to define racism as a psychological disorder. They want to put it in the diagnostical statistical manual because of the fact that it touches on those things of power and control.
No doubt.
It makes sense, yo, because it's like when you learn something, you know, and you feel a certain type of way, you know, it creates this like dynamic of doing things and making choices, you know. And you know, I've always wondered where that first choice was. Where was it decided? Like when you made that connection, you know, like you think about like I said in another podcast, I smoke cigarettes, and my dad smoked cigarettes, and he flicked them a certain type of way, and I started smoking, and I realized I was flicking them that way. You know, even those minute things, you know what I'm saying, I think kind of play into what she's talking about even more with like racism, you know, so that's good to hear, you know what I'm saying, that people are thinking about it like
so that. Are you saying that the psychological community, they're I mean, because, you know, racism is a learned behavior.
Correct.
You know, so, I mean, could you also classify that as some sort of, you know, psychological condition? Like, would it run under could you classify it the same way you classify, you know, anxiety disorder? I mean,
it would probably be closer to a personality disorder of some kind or a neurological disorder.
Disorder, perhaps, when you're not looking at people as being human. You know, I mean, you're disassociating the idea that they're human beings and
Dissociation is more like an internal experience. So it's not necessarily external. It's kind of like having an out-of-body feeling, but it would be more in the sense of like OCD feeling. Like you don't want to be around Black people, you don't want to be around other people of color because it causes those feelings of anxiety or anger.
So check this out, Breezy. If the United States were a person, or consider Uncle Sam as it were, right? Representing the United States, this person comes into your room, and we're consider all the collective things that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And this person comes in representing the United States and all its whatnots.
Mm-hmm.
What would be the first few questions you would like to ask the United States?
How do you feel about having me as your counselor? What are the first things that come to mind? Let's talk about that. And that'd probably be the only question that I ask, because from there they would probably try to avoid talking about race. You know, they would try to avoid it. And then I would directly say, well, how do you feel about me being Black? And then, you know, they would probably deflect and say, oh, you're cool for a Black person, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I would say, okay, well then help me understand why I'm cool over somebody else, you know, and let's look at those parts. And is it because you think I'm cool because you know me now? You know, a lot of people have this image of what a Black person might be like, and then they meet one and they're like, oh, this person's so cool, you know.
Right.
And they see their humanity. So I would definitely be asking those types of questions, and then try to get to the core of like what makes them uncomfortable about me being Black. Or, you know, do you feel like if my skin was 4 shades darker, would you feel any more anxious, or would you feel less anxious? Those types of questions to kind of get the person thinking, especially if you can ask them why they don't see color. So then it's like, well, why don't you see color? And then you kind of wait for them to finish that answer. And how you recorrect their language is by saying, well, it hurts me to hear you say that because it denies my history. I have a lot of history revolving around the fact that I'm seen as Black. And so that kind of minimizes my personal experiences and tells me that maybe you don't want to hear them. So that kind of answer helps people understand, like, well, no, I care about this person. I do want to learn about this person. Like, I don't want to deny their history, because a lot of people can kind of relate to that. Like, Like, I don't really want to get to know you. And it's like, that kind of hurts. You know, that's kind of what they're saying when they say, I don't see color. It's like, I don't really want to get to know you. I'm just going to assume that you do everything that I do. I'm going to assume that you are the same culture that I am into, you know, and that's not necessarily true. And so the other part that you have to bring up when you're talking about, oh, I don't see color, is the historic and systemic ramifications of that, which goes back to the Jim Crow era. And then you also have to talk about, oh geez, I forgot what I was saying.
You know, the thing is, that's the thing about this, man. It's so heavy and convoluted, man. You know, it's just like you'll be in one thing and then figure out just how deep that is, and I have it happen to me a lot too when I'm talking about this stuff, because it takes you in so many different places. Because that's why I kind of posed a question like that, trying to compound everything under one umbrella, as it were. Because, like, even though I don't have your expertise and education in it, but, I posed this question on our last show, I would be like, are you insane? Like, I mean, because you keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. So right. I need to, and I know that's not the apropos question to ask as a therapist. Maybe just as a regular person, I would sit the United States down and be like, are you fucking insane? Yeah, because I mean, we've been asking all the pretty questions long enough. To think about it, we've already asked all the pretty questions. We got a lot of policies that made sure we don't sit at the back of the bus anymore, that we can drink at the same fountains, that we can have a black president. Those are padding, comfortable things, but we're still being killed off. So I would shake that motherfucker and be like, "Are you insane?"
Right.
Yeah, shit. I'm sorry, y'all. I done changed the energy up in this mug. Shit, I want to beat Uncle Sam's ass up in this motherfucker. Shit.
Maybe it's time to do some calming activities.
Yeah. I'm breathing right over here, Breezy. I'm breathing.
Good. Yeah, keep breathing. That's all we can really do right now, is to keep breathing and keep learning. And, the whole that's what I was going to talk about, is the whole I don't see color has a historical root to it, which started way back during the American Revolution, where we tried to break away from England, Britain.
The UK.
Whatever. They took us over and we were like, no. At that point, the people in power realized, that if the poor white people got together with the poor black people, then they would create unions together and they would lobby for higher wages. They would create unions together and they would lobby for better working conditions. So they introduced the idea of race. And they introduced that idea to make the poor white people feel like they had something above the poor black people. And you can look up this research through Tim Weiss. And Tim Weiss has a lot of great rants about this. But it was that idea that, how do you get the poor white people to vote against their better interests? How do you get them to vote for the rich white people? And that's where you introduce this idea that black people are criminal and black people are less desirable, so that you create that divide within the community so that they don't get together. They don't have those conversations, and they don't create these unions to ask for better working conditions. So that was introduced like way back in the 1800s. So race is a construct. It is not real. There's no genetic code. There's no code that links it to it. Now, skin color is real. Melanin is real. That you can find in your genetic code. It is when you attribute personality characteristics to a person's phenotype, which is just fancy for physical traits. When you attribute personality characteristics to physical traits, that's when you have an issue, and that's when you start to cross the line into racism and prejudice.
I'm just thinking about, like, what you were talking about there, like with the poor blacks and whites getting together. It's like the stigma of the Black Panther Party, for example. There was this footage that I had gotten privy to see one time where Fred Hampton had went into this community of white farmers, poor dirt white farmers and stuff, trying to argue for better this and that, what have you and stuff, and get, government subsidies and what have you. And, but the government wasn't trying to hear their plight. So the Black Panther Party goes in there and they go to speak to these guys. A bunch of white farmers, visually wise, if you want to stereotype, they look like the type that would hang black people type looking white folks. You know what I'm saying? By the end of the meeting, Fred Hampton had them guys so enamored. There's footage of this redneck-like white farmer, like, I completely wholeheartedly support the Black Panther Party. You know what I'm
Yep.
saying? And the irony is, like, it's the same type of person with that same type of accent that's saying that, you know, Black Panthers are, you know, the equivalent of the KKK and all this, for people that haven't done their homework on them. And it's like,
Oh, yeah.
they've never killed any white people. There's no death, you know, attributed to them for white people and stuff like that. And they never advocated for the death of white people or anything like that. Actually, if you look into their lore, I mean, into their stuff, they spoke more about economics and stuff and capitalism and such. You know, the armament of people, or Black people in particular, is where they emphasize that aspect of it. But they talk about a broad range of things. That's why they ended up there talking with those poor white farmers. But see, how many white people, for the most part, would tell that story or even know that story? They're just quick to go to the soundbite of, aren't the Black Panthers, you know, the equivalent of the Black version of the KKK? Because that's the soundbite, you know, and just researching little things like that, realizing, like, man, you had serious, staunch white farmers that were about the Black Panther Party. You know?
The saddest thing about that is that he was a week or so after that exact rally where he had Hispanics, whites, and Black people standing together. The police went in and shot him in his sleep.
Come on. Come on.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what I was going to say, if they can't deal with the Black Panther, well, what about Martin Luther King and the Poor People's March? You know, they were going to get ready to, they had a coalition, they were going to, but he was killed before it could happen.
And it's been debated that, you know, when MLK started speaking against Vietnam and speaking for, like, you know, he was in Memphis when he was killed. He was there with the sanitation workers and stuff like that. And when he became a little bit more broader, you know, all of a sudden he seemed to had gotten silenced, as it were, you know, at that moment in time. I always say, you know, people always talk about, you know, MLK was the lighter version of what Malcolm X represent. I always tell people, watch that last speech of MLK.
No, he was just
man, that last speech, I'm like, I love Malcolm X, but he don't have a speech like that speech. That speech will make you want to goddamn it turn some shit around. Every time I watch that speech, I'm in tears, like wanting to just, goddamn it, like, you ready to change some shit. And that thunder, man, it's just like, you know, he always had that thunder with his speeches. We all know this about MLK, but that last one, as far as like, that MLK wasn't about to turn the other cheek. If you would have stopped MLK that night, you was going to get your ass kicked.
Somebody must have said something to him.
And boom, then he was taken out. You know what I'm saying?
Literally that night.
Hey, yo, yeah. We were watching the Mandela movie the other day. You know, when he was in jail, he turned around and hit the motherfucker. You know what I'm saying? And the other homie had to come calm him down. And then you see him get out of jail, and then Winnie was acting and shit. Like, that was cool to see, yo.
And that kind of stuff really played out. He's talking about, he saw this, we watched this movie about Nelson Mandela, and, like, you know, it was like right when he went to prison, and the guards all trying to, like, kind of get him to act off some type of way, but he had a partner that was with him and stuff, you know, got one of the guys that was in prison with him, saying, no, you know, kind of save that for another day, and we all know how that played out and stuff. I always say Nelson Mandela is the greatest hero in history. Like, there is nobody who has a story of being in prison, well, first fighting a plight for years, going to prison for 27 years for that plight, and then coming out of that prison of that same country, and you become president of that country. Name another person with that story. I'll wait. Not to offend biblical people, but Jesus Christ's story ain't even that good. You know what I'm saying? I'm sorry. At least not the physical version. I'm not talking about when he come back and he's blah, blah, blah. But the first half, up to when he was 33, it don't beat Nelson Mandela's story. I'm sorry, biblical people. I'm sorry. It don't beat that. In prison for 27 years, you lead that same nation. Tell me who's better. Tell me.
You know, I feel like I heard from Dad that he could have got out a lot earlier, but he knew how everything was going down.
We saw that
in the So he chose when he was getting off. And that's power.
We need that. We need that, Breezy. Where's the Nelson?
We need a leader like that. They keep killing all our leaders.
But you know, I will say this. With that said, there are some serious leaders on this planet. You know, they don't get the optics that, you know, all the big mouths get, as it were. But there are people out here, you know, I forget this woman's name. I don't know if she's Indian or something. She's really popular. She's like in the millennial age. Yeah. You heard of the lady? This
Malala.
Yeah. Now she's one of those ones that she's of that
She
ilk.
got shot in the head for going to
Yeah,
school.
she's of that ilk of, when she's like in her 40s and 50s, she's gonna be something.
Yeah, she's
You
the
know?
young generation. It's the young generation that's going to take this and change it. Really.
I mean, MLK and all them were in their 20s. They wasn't old men doing that stuff. Matter of fact, it'd be argued almost every revolution. I can't think of many revolutions where it was the old people, because George Washington and them, they were in their 20s and stuff. They wasn't like 40, 50-year-old men. We see that image on the dollar and think that's how old he was when he crossed the Delaware. Like, no, he was a young man when he crossed he wasn't that damn old. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
these guys were young. You know who the old man was? Benjamin Franklin.
He was
the
like
old
40
man.
too.
And he's the only
that
person
old.
we have on our currency that was not president. And he's on the biggest denomination, the $100 bill, but he was never president.
You don't rap about having Washington in your pocket.
No, you're right in Benz, man. Well, he was the wise old man amongst all of them, but hey, Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence and he was 33 years old.
Oh, can I be that small?
Wrote Common Sense when he was like 32. Young by the people that if they were alive now, they would be the millennial age.
Yep.
Like you were saying that they're trying to get millennials to move in the community. They need that energy, man.
Mm-hmm.
For every pocket of our nation for it to move forward. Right now, like getting back to this whole civil rights thing that we're talking about, for the first time, even eclipsing the 60s, every state had a rally and a protest. Even in the 60s, at its height, didn't have every single United States rally. So that in itself, speaks volumes. That we're in a time where every single state had something going on. Literally, the day that the thing popped off around here, I noticed when I went and looked online, it was popping off everywhere. It was like we was all like synergetically connected to do something, and because I look online, I'm like, damn, there's all kind of protests going on. And the one that was coordinated here, we had no idea that there were other coordinated rallies and stuff. And just happened to look online and everybody just, it was almost serendipitous.
Right.
Like everybody just was on that same wave. And that energy is just building. I just hope it doesn't dissipate. I hope this keeps going and it doesn't burn out or blow up.
It'll keep going.
Yeah, when you think about all these protests in history, they went on for a long time. The bus protest with
a year.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, we just watched something about that. Are you hip to Doctor Who?
I am. I'm aware of Doctor Who. Yeah.
Oh, but you don't watch it now.
I've seen like a few episodes. I have my favorite Doctor, and then I didn't watch it after that one.
No, you're like me. I just got hip, but we just saw this episode about the whole Rosa Parks thing here recently and stuff. It was pretty cool.
Oh, I didn't know that whole thing lasted a whole year, and that just makes me realize that technology and the internet is really pushing this movement forward. The fact that we can have information directly to our fingertips. Like Shai said, I don't even watch the news anymore because I can go on Twitter, I can watch live videos, I can go on Facebook and find live feeds of my friends at protests, and I can see it happen in real time. I don't need somebody. Like the news was covering the Grand Rapids protest, and they were saying that windows were being broken and there was already a fire. And then I asked my friends who were live streaming at the protest. They walked around and asked like over 50 people before they found out that it was a small trash can fire. It was contained. It was in the middle of the street. And the windows that got broken were not near the police station. It was happening somewhere else. Someone was taking advantage of the police being distracted and were doing things in other places. And so it wasn't necessarily the protest. And that kind of showed me that the news will hype things up to get those views. We've all known that, but that was my first instance of being like, wow, they're really blowing this out of proportion.
Yeah, putting a whole different spin on it for the ratings, as and not caring about the fear that they stroke. They don't. They just kind of, I've seen various memes where I saw this one meme where there were various components happening, but the worst of all the components in the meme, the person was zooming in on the worst component, and not all the other little elements that was going on that could explain the one centralized component, and putting all the optics on just the one thing, like people putting just the optics on the rioting and looting, and attributing that to the protesters. Like you got peaceful protesters, and then you got those motherfuckers that just want to burn shit up and loot, that want to steal a pair of Jordans that ain't got nothing to do with George Floyd or any of the plight of that, and try to equate them to, realistic protests. You know, it's putting optics and spin on it like that, you know? And then, but see, again, like you said, because of the internet, though, we're starting to realize that they do put those spins on things, and we can get our own visuals on shit, you know, and see what's going on. Like yourself, I have not watched the news on TV in a couple of years, Breezy.
Wow.
I get my news straight up on YouTube. You know, I get the legitimate sources, as it were. I'll check out the MSNBC, CNN, but I get it via YouTube. I don't sit in front of a tube and do that shit because, you know, I don't like to start my day off knowing, you know, all these bad things. You know, I like to keep myself hip, but it's almost like fear porn. You know, fear porn. Be scared before you even leave outside your door. COVID-19 is going to get you, or racism is going to get you. But man, whoa, what the fuck? You know what I'm saying? You just you have to kind of back it up for a minute. It's like all those things are true, but I can't be living in my home all scared and timid and shit.
Can you just inform me, please? Just inform me of the facts. Let me decide whether or not it's life-threatening.
Oh, but see, that'll bring the ratings, Breezy. They got to scare the living fucking daylights out of you, right?
And keep you tuned in.
Oh, look, like weathermen, right? Man, weathermen have a ball, like when a hurricane and all that shit's coming, and they can use all that fancy meteorologist gear and shit. Oh, man, because, you know, it's their time to shine. You know, they always in the background. Nobody gonna give a fuck about the weatherman. Don't let a goddamn hurricane or tornado. That motherfucker wearing his best shit. He know. Let me tell y'all something. Y'all gonna die. Because he look right here, you know, and just start scaring the shit out of you and shit, man. Because man, it's all about ratings.
Anderson Cooper of CNN got caught going to the deepest part of a flood to record himself up in chest-high water. And like 5 feet away, his camera crew were only up to their ankles in water. So he went and found a ditch to go stand in to report in. And somebody took a picture of the whole scene of him up to his chest and his camera crew just chilling.
Man, I wish these damn gray hair would have got wet.
I know.
Oh, hey, okay. I guess we're going to start bringing it to the rapid fire now, Breezy.
So, we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to ask one kind of big question that can lead to a couple of other things. What is the scariest dream that you've ever had?
Ever had?
Oh, man. I think I've mentioned this one time before, where I had this dream where it was a reoccurring dream. I had never had a reoccurring dream before. It lasted for like 2 or 3 nights. And I was floating further and further out into space. You know what I'm saying? Like it started out with me floating outside, you know, the planet, and then I started floating. But the thing is, like, I really felt like I was in space. Like I couldn't discern if it was a dream. I didn't know what was going on. I was petrified. And I've had numerous of people, you know, I mean, Holly, for example, was saying maybe that was a way of, how did she put it? Like, you know, I was I like the daydream because, you know, I just kept going further and further out. I mean, you're a professional. What would you make of that?
Sounds like you astral projected and then you didn't have your cord connected to your body, so you felt like you were about to die.
I like that one. I like that. Okay, we'll hold with that. I'll pass it to everyone. I love that, yes.
Let me see, I had a dream I had a couple scary dreams where people that I care about died in my dream, but they wouldn't really be dead. Something would be off about it, like maybe something ghost or something would be off about it. But the last dream I just had that was a little scary was about COVID. You remember I told you? That I had a dream. My dad sat down next to me, and then I talked to him, and I'm like, I think I just gave it to him. And I woke up. Now you know where that came from. That's why I'm like, I'm putting up the news.
Yeah, man. The news got my sister having nightmares
about COVID. But that was when it first happened, so I got an excuse. See? It's more funny than scary.
Oh, man. Yeah, man. I don't know. Yeah, that was a tragic comedy. Oh, man.
Yeah, I'd probably say the worst dream I ever had, that was when I was a little kid. Scary, not worse. It was scary. The worst, scariest thing is different to me, not me. But like, I just remember I was doing something and we had old furniture and we was in the trailer and I just got like completely like riddled in bullets and And like, but I didn't die. It was the weird part. I was,
See, like me, it's like the
yeah,
dead but not dead.
yeah, it was so weird, you know. And I woke up and like, so fucking real, But I was a kid though, you know, and that was like the worst dream. But like, I always have dreams about like tragedy, like fucking tsunami tidal waves and like apocalyptic type things. And I'm just like fucking fighting to survive, bro. And that's why like
Scooby dreaming about the end of the world, man. What do you think of
Hey, it's coming.
that should be scary as hell.
What did the Dixie ask you?
What's that?
Oh, I said it's coming. The end of the world's coming.
No, don't encourage that. Now this man gonna have a nightmare tonight about the end of the world, man.
Like I don't even. I think we're gonna bring peace and shit, but then the dreams it'd be.
Yeah, I'm saying. Look, in life, Scooby's all in. Kumbaya, my love. And then when he goes to sleep at night, goddamn it, he's a fucking meteors is blowing up our planet and shit.
Man,
you know what I'm saying? Oh man, that's why Scooby want peace, man, because he done dreamed about the future. We gonna die.
I think the scariest dream I've ever had was that I was on a wooden front porch and these pea pod things kept growing up on it. And if the pea pod reached fruition, it would burst open and little bats would come out. And like, if it bit you, you died. Okay. So we're on this deck, just like chopping down these vines with a machete so that they don't grow. But then like, I didn't realize they were growing behind me. So then my friend yelled to me and I turned around and suddenly I'm surrounded on all four sides with these vine plant things. And then they burst open and then the bats are just like eating me. And I can like feel it in the dream. Okay. And I'm like, no. And I'm like reaching out and like, I pass out in the dream. So everything starts to go black and I like fall through this weird like wormhole into my body and I wake up. I'm like, oh my God.
Breezy, let me ask you something. What the hell did you have to eat the night before?
Dude, I don't even know. And sometimes I have prophetic dreams. So I'm like, please let this not be a prophetic dream. Please let this not come true.
I hope that you are not somewhere where vines are growing as you're chopping them and they keep growing. Please.
I know, right? I'm outie. I'm out of there.
Well, look, we done went ahead and wrapped up the rapid fire. Oh, God. Man, shit. Put the way down.
So I'm actually gonna pop a picture up on the screen because this shit has been happening to me for the last few nights. And I drew the picture of this person that I keep seeing in my dream. And I'm sitting on this couch over here that y'all can't see. And Alan or Scooby is sitting next to me, and then Bill comes and sit down. I'm like, hey, what's up, Bill? And Bill will walk away. And I'll look back at the TV, and I'll look back and somebody else is there. And I'm like, hey, what's up? And I'll look at the TV, and I look back, and then it's this like tall, lanky man in a tuxedo with like a face and like circle, like two little circle black eyes and a circle black mouth. I'm like, hey, what's up? And then he gets up and runs away, and I wake up. But I've had that dream for a little while now.
What?
Yeah.
That's Mr. BL, man. Mr. BL is following you, bro. Oh, my God.
Sure it's not Slender Man?
Slender Man doesn't have.
Oh, yeah, Slender Man. Yeah.
Slender Man doesn't have any facial features like.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Maybe we just got Slender Man wrong, bro. Slender Man want to kill your ass, man. I'm telling you.
These are some pretty scary dreams.
Look, this is the man that I keep seeing.
Whoa! Show Breezy. Whoa!
This is what I keep seeing.
Oh no, that's definitely like memeable, and at the same time,
And it's the hairstyle. I'm trying to understand what's up with the hairstyle. Like, he's a monster with fashion sense, apparently. Like.
Oh shit! But that's it. We got to wrap it up now.
All right, so here's another great episode of Bridging the Gap with our very special guest, Breezy Scott. Making her return back here on the BTG Fam Group. Love it. I'm Bill.
Motherfucking kid.
I'm Chef Mac.
And this has been episode 17 with Breezy Scott. And for those of you watching this, make sure to check out our blog, and we may have some little extra additions there. And just wait for that. All right.
Let Abigail say something before we get it.
Oh, yeah. And Abigail, we have a mascot here now, Breezy, and she has something she'd like to tell you.
Yeah? Oh, jeez. Nice to meet you, Abigail. I hope that you stay light and don't give up the fight.
All right. Thank you again, Breezy.
It's nice seeing you.
Thanks for having me.
And look, we want to have you again, so we're gonna have a three-peat.
Yes, yes, please.
I have to say this talk was so nice. It was much needed, and I feel like this relief, and it was great talking to you.
Oh, good. I'm happy. Thank you so much for having me on here, and I do look forward to seeing you guys again in the future.
Indeed. All right, thank you so well. Do we want to do all that, or should we just call it now? Because everybody, I mean, y'all still do the yoga thing?
We can always do it another day, but that's up to y'all.
Yeah, we can do it another time. Yeah, we'll do it another time. We've been talking for a minute, so we'll hold off on that this time. Is that good with you, Breezy?
That sounds great. Then we can do it together.
Indeed, indeed. All right, well, look, you have a beautiful day. You take care, Golden Guyan.
You too. All right, high vibe humans. I'll see y'all on the flip side. Peace
All right,
out.
man.
Okay, what's up, Bridging the Gap people? It's Chef Mac. Like I'm doing my normal kind of ending spiel. First things first, I just want to give a special thanks to Breezy for being a return guest, our first return guest to the podcast. I want to say, make sure you leave a like on this video. Make sure you put in the comments this week, comment box, and subscribe and ding on that notification bell so that you can get notified every time we go live. Not live, every time we upload a video, because we are starting to upload more and more. I also want to say, go subscribe to Zombie Studios, ZOMB. It'll be on the screen. Studios on YouTube. It is a little hard to find. It's a new channel, so you may have to type in Zombie Studios, Scooby the Kid, to watch all the music videos that we are posting, because we talk a lot about it. Shook and all of them. So thank you all for watching this video, and I will see you all Saturday in the vlog.